All right, and welcome back, guys, to the Self-Selecting Podcast. I am your host, Corey. If you are new to the podcast, new to my content, thank you. Thank you for being here, however you got here, wherever you were listening from. Apple, Spotify, do me a favor, leave me a review. Let me know what you think of the episode. Let me know what you think of the podcast as a whole. This is episode 18, so if you are new and you like it, you want more of it, there are 17 other episodes. All my other content can also be found on Instagram. And if you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. That is so helpful. Do it for the algorithm. Let me know what you think across the board. Let me know if there are topics that you're like, hey, this is one somehow you have skirted around, even though we've gotten a few very similar topics. Can you please talk about this? Please let me know. Let me know what that topic is that I've not covered that you'd like more information on. And lastly, Patreon, if you're interested in exclusive educational content. That is key point here. Go check out Patreon. I have two tiers, one that is all written content, one that is all audio content. More information on the restructure of those tiers coming soon. Anyways, we are getting started. So what are we talking about today? That is post-show, the period immediately following a competition. So for physique athletes, but I mean, everything that I'm going to cover today, I'll just let you know, it can still be applied to anyone who's in that post-dietary phase. If you are someone who has been through a fat loss phase and you're like, hey, navigating out of this in a way that doesn't result in excessive body fat gain, yeah, this is also for you, even if you haven't stepped on stage. Now, I think one of the issues that I continue to see is the oversimplification of this post-show period. So there are two common strategies that individuals they suggest are the ways to navigate post-show. There's the super conservative one, which essentially, I mean, like I'll define both, but there's super conservative, super liberal. Conservative, don't gain weight. Do not add on any kind of unfavorable weight gain. Our goal is to minimize body fat gain, which yes, I'm going to go deep into both of these. That's one side of the spectrum. Now the other side, don't worry about weight gain. Hey, you just finished up your diet. It's okay. Body fat will come on. You can always lose it. Listen, like I've done both. Like my first show, I competed for the first time in it was early 2015. It was like January 2015. I was 19 years old. When I finished my season, like I did 2 shows at that time during that competition season. I was very, very worried about the weight gain, which is where many people are in the earlier parts of their career. So naturally, I reverse dieted. I went into a very, very gradual, it wasn't maintenance because I mean, like by definition, I was still losing weight. I was still in a position where getting weight to stick, it just was not happening. And that's hyper conservative, some would say. That is the approach that a lot of people take after their show, after their fat loss phase. They opt for a reverse diet. And if you're not familiar with that, I mean, essentially that is just walking calories back up in a systematic way that allows you to pull yourself out of a deficit, which, okay, in a non-competition setting, maybe this is fine. This is a tactic. This is a strategy that I would use for clients who maybe didn't get as lean as a competitor. So in a non-competition fat loss phase, okay, could make sense. Even for someone who is, let's say, getting ready for a show, maybe they don't make it all the way to stage. Maybe at week 8, week 9, week 10, they're like, I think we need to change trajectories. And I mean, like it's happened in my case where as a coach, I've been like, I don't think we're going to make it to stage. I actually think here's an argument for why we shouldn't make ourselves our way to stage. And we should reconsider. And in that case, like, someone's not truly contest lean. They're not even like on the more extreme side of, a deficit. So yeah, reverse diet, it makes sense. The thing is, like, when we're talking about the approach that you should take post-show, there isn't a one size fits all. There's not a standardized way to navigate that period because it is so highly individualized. And truly, like, I believe you need to take the approach that satisfies your needs at the time. So you need to take the approach that truly it covers you in terms of what should be the priority. And when we're talking about the end of a competition prep, I mean, yes, it would be great if we could maintain that kind of physique. It would be great if there were no consequences. There are, though. And basing that tactile, that approach to like what is needed in that individual at that given time based on their skill set, their competition history, this isn't just limited to physiological needs. I mean, yes, physiological needs, that is going to be a large one, a large determining factor in how we approach that period. But the psychological needs, they can't be overlooked, because as much as we want to separate psychology from physiology in this kind of sport, in the world of fitness, we really can't. And like, yeah, we can lay out, we can argue until we're blue in the face on like, okay, what is the most optimal way to minimize visceral fat gain? But depending on where you are, depending on how thin you're actually spread, that solution, it really lives and dies on paper. It's not very pragmatic. Like, I can tell you, this is the most optimal rate of gain post-show. But truly, if you can't follow it, it's not very pragmatic. So post-show, what is it? What is it not? Now, this period, I would say largely the goal, the priority is to restore and to regulate those dysregulations that occur from being in that state of low energy availability. Now, this period, it can last for 6 weeks. It can last for 6 months. I mean, like, there isn't a strict guideline for how long like your post-show actually lasts before you transition into a true like intentional growth phase or maintenance phase, health phase, whatever you want to call it. But this is essentially how we're going to establish a baseline for what the preceding phase is going to be. Now, let's take someone who is highly resilient, someone who didn't take any extremes during their contest prep. Even then, even if you are very resilient, even if you did everything by the book, I can speak to this. Like, I mean, anecdotally, my last prep, I did everything very systematically. There were no unnecessary extremes that were really taken. Drug use, very minimal. Yet, my post-show, it was messy. It wasn't smooth sailing. And I think like getting into why it's hard. Why is this period so challenging? It's because of the alteration in the physiological demands on the body relative to that individual's baseline prior to contest prep. So you take someone who, yeah, maybe they're used to sitting generally very lean. They're used to sitting at a lower body fat, yet to do so, it's not very taxing. To do so, it doesn't require a lot of strain, whether that be literally, like, okay, it requires a lot of changes in their execution and their scheduling and modifications to how they approach creating a deficit or, whatever, adhering to their workouts. Yet once they enter contest prep, that changes. That's one aspect. Okay, the physical demands of being in prep and the adjustment in order to meet those demands versus intrinsically those stressors and the weight that carries for that individual, and then the duration that they have to sustain that. So it really comes down to there being an insufficient amount of energy for the individual in order to drive down body fat and in order to become stage lean, and how this input, or I guess lack of input, this output is then captured by the body. The physiological cascade that then occurs, these alterations, I mean, that ultimately is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about dietary fatigue. Sure, there's a component to that is, exclusively mental fatigue and just like your ability to consistently adhere. I had a client this morning who, in his check-in, he was like, to be honest, I'm feeling burnt out. Like, this is hard. It's hard to sustain what I'm doing. And it's not necessarily that we're in a steep deficit. It's just that not a contest prep client, but he's like, this is challenging given the changes in circumstance, in career path and personal struggles. He travels a lot for work. And he's like, I do feel like I'm at the point of burnout, despite maybe previous deficits that have been objectively greater. They've been more challenging. And, this is very similar, and this can be applied to both men and women, but it's essentially the chronic state of being in a state of low energy availability and the effects relative energy deficiency syndrome that in men can cause some degree of hypogonadism, in females hypothalamic amenorrhea. And this is something that, again, the impacts highly individualized, like how this actually translates in terms of symptoms, how this presents. For some, they've experienced this their entire life. That is their baseline. They're like, I've never been in a non-amenorrheic state. But the solution, it's going to be very similar. And it essentially boils down to removing any kind of stimulus that is driving up fatigue, any kind of stressor. This can come from training volume. It can come from actual structured cardio. Cardio is very fatiguing. You guys know. So reducing both of these, reducing the volume or the frequency down to at least a maintenance, which can be scary, especially if you're someone who's like, I've never not done cardio or I've never not trained 5-6 days a week. Inversely, raising the calories up. Sure, that can help. But relative to post-show, we have to be mindful of this because in this state, hunger signaling is going to be heavily skewed, which is something I'm going to get into here shortly. But as we're increasing calories into, let's say, a surplus, into a state or at a level where the individual is not experiencing compounding dietary fatigue, there is going to be some degree of fat gain that occurs depending on the client's the actual surplus, the degree of the surplus we're in. Because when you break this down, to lose 1 pound of body fat per week, that means you need to be in a 500 calorie deficit per day. Okay, well, in order to gain a pound of body fat, which is not what we want in this state, or for the most part, I'm going to say any state, we're not just typically aiming for body fat gain. If that's what we're going for, if that's what we're at least calibrating our radar to okay, what would need to happen in order to put on a pound of exclusive just body fat, it doesn't require that much, especially when you consider that in a state where you're not reporting food as tightly, you're not tracking intake, there are a bunch of hidden calories, kind of slipping through the cracks. Maybe a few days you miss some cardio, maybe activity's a little bit lower because, you're lax now because, oh, hey, I'm going to go shopping instead of doing cardio. That's going to, work out to the same calorie burn. Sure. Whenever you're making these, micro adjustments periodically throughout the day, it's actually very easy to overshoot, put yourself in a position where, now you are 500 or maybe not even 500, you're 300 calories over. Okay, well, even let's scale that back. Okay, let's say you're 250 calories over. In 2 weeks, 250 calories over your maintenance. 2 weeks, that's going to result in a pound of body fat gained. This is the part that I think becomes convoluted because these two camps really do push okay, I want you to continue to practice a hyper restrictive, very rigid approach to post-show, which ultimately is going to continue to drive up dietary fatigue. It's going to also set the precedence that if you are not 100% on track, there's going to be weight gain. Even if technically we're not, getting ready for a show, we still have to have some degree of rigidity in place, which yes, splitting hairs, I do believe in that globally. I believe in structure in how you're going to modulate your calorie intake if that's something that if composition is something that you want to have control over. If you do if you don't want to get fatter and you have a higher appetite and just generally hunger signaling is not something you're like super attuned to, then yeah, maybe that degree of rigidity is needed. And your perception of how rigid you actually have to be in order to prevent yourself from gaining body fat, largely going to come from hunger signaling, as well as your body fat set point and how far away from that body fat set point you actually are. And this is why like letting hunger dictate intake post show. I mean, I think that's a very slippery slope that a lot of people, they kind of buy into the fantasy of, well, you're not getting ready for something immediately. There's not something down the pipeline 3 months from now that is going to require you to be in the best shape, or let's just say best very loosely. It's obviously subjective, but there's not going to be something a few months down the road that requires you to be at your lowest body fat level. So what's the harm in being a little loose, a little off track here and there? There's nothing wrong with that, except the fact that being in that state for so long, being dieted down, being at a low body fat, and potentially being at your lowest body fat thus far, I mean, the consequences, yes, physiologically of like, accruing fatigue from the prep itself, that's there. But then there are the physiological adaptations relative to hunger signaling that are unavoidable. And frankly, that is your body signaling, okay, I need more fuel to survive, to do the functions that are required on a daily basis. What you're feeding me, the input, the calories, the energy that I'm receiving is not enough to accomplish what needs to happen. Just because you finished your season and you know, like, hey, I'm not going to be on stage and like food's going to come up, body fat's going to come up, your body didn't get the memo. Like, it doesn't receive that in a way. I mean, I do kind of humanize it. It doesn't trust that you're going to do that. It's going off of all of the proof, all of the evidence that you've given it thus far. And for a lot of people, that's like 3 to 4 months of being in a hypercaloric restricted state. Now, these adaptations, like the degree of these adaptations, they're going to be influenced largely from the gap that is created, like where you end your prep at in terms of body fat versus your body fat set point, the body fat set point in which you feel regulated at, where these adaptations are not continuing to occur. Now, I've talked about resilience relative to like the HPO axis, sure. And like when those hormonal shifts start to occur, because I mean, like getting lean, reproduction, that's not a critical function. And that's something that your body very quickly will be like, yo, you can't even feed yourself. Why am I sparing up this energy? Why am I allocating energy, the little food that I'm getting, towards functions that are non-critical, i.e. reproductive functions? Yet when we consider hunger signaling, it's important to remember that you have 2 hunger hormones, or you have more than that, but the 2 main ones we're going to focus on, Ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is going to indicate whether or not you're actually experiencing hunger. That is going to encourage you, encourage the sensation, the feeling, perception of hunger, whereas leptin is going to present as the sensation of satiation. So your satiety, which if you're not familiar, there's actually an index of food. It's the satiety index. You can go through and like they've done studies to support that certain foods result in a higher degree of satiation, satiety, which is helpful if you're someone who is very hungry, if you're someone who has struggled with feeling full and let's just say overeating, overconsuming, or you're not as tapped into those impulses that you have, whether you're in a fat loss phase or not. Referencing the satiety index, that can be really, really beneficial. And it's something that I do encourage a lot of clients to do, particularly if adherence is getting a little spotty, particularly post-show when these signals, the hunger signaling, when it's blunted despite body fat coming up, which ultimately, that is something that you should anticipate. You should anticipate, even though body fat's going to come up and it should come up, the hunger signaling is not going to directly correlate with the rate of gain. So I've kind of already covered this. Ghrelin, it stimulates appetite levels. They are increasing overnight or during any kind of extended fast, which is typically why for individuals who are used to more of like an IF style of dieting. Like, sure, it might work acutely. It might be a good strategy if you're someone who's like, I have a meal coming up later, then I know it's going to be a larger meal. It's going to be somewhat untracked. Yeah, fasting in an acute setting, it can have its benefits, but I really think we're talking about someone who's already in a dysregulated state from a hunger signaling standpoint. Fasting ultimately is going to further skew that signaling. Also, like during high states of chronic stress, which that is contest prep. Contest prep is a state of very chronic, very extended durations of high stress. Now, when we look at leptin is going to inhibit that hunger with the overarching goal to maintain that energy balance. The kicker, though, is that leptin is produced in adipose sites, meaning that adiposity, like in body fat. So as your body fat goes down, this is something that it's incredibly important to recognize and to not just understand, but to hone in on if you're having that, let's say, the frustration post-show where you're like, yo, like I'm eating so much, I'm eating high volume foods and I'm trying my best to be adherent, but like for whatever reason, it's not making a dent. I feel like I'm insatiable. Well, hey, that might come down to body fat is not high enough to have whatever degree of circulating leptin is adequate for you to feel normal, for you to feel like you. And this is typically what I reference whenever I'm talking to a new client or I'm talking to someone I'm, maybe getting ready to work with, like on a one-on-one consultation. I'm like, hey, like we want to pre-collect that data around hunger signaling because we want to know generally when are you so hungry that it's unmanageable and it's almost creating an issue with adherence. We want to catch it beforehand because ultimately that might give us some insight post-show or post-diet into when you're going to start feeling like a human again, when you yourself, when we're getting so far out of range from whatever your body fat set point is. That is a clue. It's a clue into what we can expect after we conclude the diet. Now, the literature is pretty definitive that like these adaptations, they take much longer to return to normal, even though body fat is regained at a steady rate. Now, this is why small increases in food, like the reverse dieting approach, not only is it not favorable, but I would even argue it's detrimental to someone coming out of this competition phase, this competition season, competition prep. Don't know why I'm struggling with words. 26 minutes in, that's not too bad. Going through your post-show in a very conservative fashion, I think can have some serious drawbacks. And I think it really comes down to you aren't really coming out of a deficit, assuming like you ended in a true deficit, which most people do. It's not to say you should. I mean, like best case scenario is you were stage lean 2 weeks out so that when you got to show, food was closer to around a maintenance. Now, maybe the calories were still low, maybe body fat, hopefully body fat was very low. So that dysregulation is still going to be present, but it's not like you're going from 1,200 calories up to 1,800. Like, I think this is a maintenance, but truly like a 600-700 calorie increase. I mean, like at that point, it's a pretty big jump. And I mean, I think psychologically, it's very difficult for people to, who fall on like the more conservative side, who are very like timid with like the weight gain. They see that. And particularly if we're talking about an increase specifically in carbs, I mean, like we're going to see that almost immediately reflected on the scale weight, given that for every gram of carb that you consume, you're going to hold, like it's going to pull in like 3 to 4 grams of water. And I know I've spoken about this on previous episodes. So if you're already privy to this, cool. That is very offsetting to some individuals when they see, okay, scale weight, like I technically only ate 1,800, yet it's 450 grams roughly for just a pound, like on scale weight. So it's like you increase carbs by, let's say 100, 200 grams, maybe over the course of several weeks, but you see scale weight going up, even though you're like, yo, these calories are not that high. That is something that you need to understand. Yes, like you need to understand the manipulation that carb and fluid intake can have on scale weight, but also when we're walking it back to what does it actually take to gain a pound of body fat. Once we hit that maintenance, I mean, we're not talking about much over that, like literally 250 calories above what your maintenance is. That for 2 weeks, that is a pound of fat. That's why in this period, treating your post-show like it's all or nothing, I mean, like it's a very quick way to regain body fat rapidly because, I mean, like I've done it myself. multiple times. I've been on the conservative side. I've also been on the liberal side. Now, treating it like I'm either on track or I'm not. Like I'm telling you, like even without hunger signaling skewed, even with a very regulated level of ghrelin and leptin, it's so easy to have these meals out, to have a few extra snacks here or there. I mean, shit, even if you're eating on a meal plan, putting yourself in a position where you're like, you know what, I kind of want a little bit more food, whether it's before training or, maybe late at night. Yeah. And then you find, okay, well, this day, maybe it doesn't show up on the scale, or maybe it doesn't show up in like your physique assessment the next day, but you feel it. And over time, you do that multiple days in a row. It doesn't even have to be an untracked meal, but it starts to catch up with you. Those calories mean like they count whether they're tracked or not. And that's why like I think it's crucial to pull yourself out of that danger zone. And I don't mean to like speak in hyperboles, but also I don't think it's productive. And I think when we remove the emotion out of it, which you don't necessarily have to do, but if we're just being very logical around what needs to happen, what is optimal versus what is feasible, it's not productive to sit there if your goals require that you don't stay lean. If your goals, and that was a real back-assward way to say that, if your goals require weight gain of any sort, even in the sense maybe you're muscled as much as you need to be competitive, but you're in a position where it's like, okay, it doesn't make sense to continue to compete, thereby staying that lean is not productive. But how do we approach that? How do we determine really what is the degree, the rate of change that we can add on weight that is favorable, that gets us out of this like critical zone without overshooting? That's typically the question I get from a lot of people is, okay, post-show, how are we going to approach this? What's your strategy? How many pounds do you, like people asking me, Corey, how many pounds do you want clients to gain after they're done with their season? Now, a big part of this is going to be determined by how you prepped. I've had clients that have come to me that have prepped incredibly well. We have set ourselves up for a very, very productive post-show period, gaining phase, yet after the show ends, they move into it and we realize, hey, there's a lot of work on the back end. There's a lot of noise, a lot of things that are dysregulated that maybe weren't communicated or we didn't realize. And I say we because it's like, yeah, I can encourage the client to speak up, but at the same time, like as a coach, I do try to keep a pulse on like, how is this person actually doing? Like, are they sharing all of the necessary information? Does it appear like, maybe they were super communicative and then all of a sudden they're a little more reserved, a little more guarded with sharing biofeedback around like discomfort, irritability, hunger, fatigue, depending on how they prepped. Yes, there is a point where I can say like, generally, you should see that reflected in how well you're able to come out of your contest prep. If you prep smart, if you prep in a way that is as sustainable as contest prep can be, you have an increased likelihood of that period being easier, as opposed to if you took a lot of extremes. I've had clients come to me who they're like, hey, I just wrapped up my season. I know it wasn't ideal. I want help on the way out of this because I'm very certain that this is going to be rough. I like the way that you're doing things. I like the way that your clients have reported, their experience has been post-show. I don't want to blow up, and that's what I've done previously. Blow up is always a really interesting term because it's like the weight that we're talking about needing to gain, it's not insignificant, particularly if you're like a 130-pound female. We're talking like anywhere from 5 to 10% within the first like 6 to 10 weeks. Ultimately though, this is going to come down to what can you do? What is feasible? Because again, I can tell you and be like, hey, you should only gain at 0.25% per week. I can set that out. I can put it in the timeline, pre-formulated and be like, this is the rate of gain. And if you stick to this should only be, a little bit over your maintenance. So you should be able to follow this reasonably based on how you prepped, based on where you were prior to starting prep. However, what you're able to do, what you're actually able to follow, your ability to adhere, the minimum that your adherence that I need from someone in terms of adherence, I need you to be able to follow the plan with minimal deviations. And I actually had a client this morning ask as well. She was like, hey, when you say deviations, what does that mean? Because like I have her on a meal plan. She understands macros, and she's like, she's in a fat loss phase. She's like, I've recently started making substitutions for foods that are not as micronutrient dense. Is this okay? Or do you want me to report this as a deviation? And that's the case. I'm like, no, dude, like you are technically still hitting your macros. Like this isn't an overage that would actually affect our rate of gain. And if you were like being very honest about how you're macro matching, totally fine. Which, by the way, that's what I allow my clients to do. Like, yeah, you want to macro match? That's okay. We can agree that a meal plan might be more favorable, but even in her case, I'm like, you're at the tail end of a diet, and she's lost like 27 pounds. Like she's tiny. I'm like, yo, like we're at the point we need to wrap this up, but like it's also falling in line with, okay, it's not necessarily that adherence is getting spotty, but there are adaptations that have now occurred that are presenting themselves that would indicate if we were to continue dieting, adherence would likely begin to slip somewhere in the near future. Maybe the next 4 to 6 weeks, maybe she could ride it out. But the idea is catch it before it gets to the red. And this is something, it's not just nutrition related advice or strategy, it's training, it's communication. Adherence is a big one with what I talk about, with what I do with clients is like, you can hire me, but if you can't follow the plan, like it's not a good plan. It means that something needs to change. It means that something on a daily basis is not occurring that allows you to see the value in not going off plan. Like you've consistently made the decision that not adherence is more favorable, consciously or subconsciously. That's not a jab. And like, it's funny. I've had a lot of clients that are like, hey, listen to the podcast. I'm just curious. Do you think I'm not adherent? Like, do we need to have a talk? Do you think I'm like practicing creative non-adherence? Like, one of my girls, she's such a sweetheart, such a trooper too. I mean, she's killed it. And she's like, yo, I do Zumba classes. Is this like creative non-adherence? I'm like, no, you're good. You're good. In her case, like it's a very reasonable substitution for what her activity requirements are and like the agreed upon plan. So there's some degree of fluidity in that, kind of tying that back in to post-show. The bottom line is it does come down to what the client can adhere to. So I know I am going to contradict myself by saying like, this is the target rate of gain post-show, and these are the expectations you should aim to have, because I literally just said there's not a standardized way to do it. But the short answer is it depends on what you can adhere to. Some people, I'll tell you, like they're very honest. It's always great when they're honest. Some people aren't as honest about it, but it's very apparent to me they're going to struggle post-show, and it's not necessarily about setting a target rate of gain. It's rather minimizing the amount of overshoot that's likely going to occur. And this is reflected in really their ability to communicate. Like for the client that is like, no, I'm good. I want to reverse perfectly. I want to minimize body fat gain. Yet I can kind of see like at the end of prep, adherence is getting a little spotty. Yet they're not communicating that, but it's showing in other facets. I would say globally, a good like rule of thumb, a good range to at least aim towards or nearby in the first 6 to 10 weeks, gaining somewhere between 5% to 10% as a total increase in body weight. That's not like exclusive to muscle gain or fat gain. I mean, like, sure, you want to do the DEXA, go ahead. It's not very accurate, but I would say like you take a 130 pound female. Okay. In the first 6 to 10 weeks, adding an additional 7 to maybe 13 pounds is right around like that, like 13, 15, like that's the upper end of what I want someone at. If they add it faster, if it comes on faster, assuming that it wasn't one of those things where it was like consistent overages, maybe the first few weeks I see like, oh, you're gaining at a rate of gain that's going to overshoot. You're going to be at 13, 15 pounds very quickly in the first like 4 to 6. I'm like, maybe we need to slow it down. Maybe we do. Realistically though, there are times where those clients, like, even if I said that, even though I might know that, hey, this is what's favorable, it's not realistic. It's not realistic based on their adherence. And it shows up in check-ins because people will be like, yeah, this isn't what I intended. This wasn't my plan A, but I kind of just broke. I kind of went a little crazier than I wanted to, but this was still the best I can do. If that is the highest that adherence could be, Well, no, I'm not going to bust their balls about it. I mean, like, sure, there's a conversation quickly that needs to come around to how do we get you to increase that adherence? Like, do we need to raise the base plan? Was this overage inadvertently because, let's say, we had calories set too low? If that's the case, maybe it actually is favorable to have someone at a higher set plan, knowing that, yeah, they're going to gain weight faster than they'd like, faster than we would like. But at the end of the day, it's like, if that's what needs to happen, if that's what we need in order for them to have an improvement in adherence, okay, well, then that is more favorable than multiple weeks of failed adherence or diminishing adherence that over time begins to trend downwards. Now, what factors are going to determine where you need to target your rate of gain, that 5% to 10%? Big one is going to be body composition. I've had clients too who, frankly, like, based on their skill, where they're at as an athlete, like, it didn't make sense for them to get leaner than they did. Even if it wasn't stage condition for a show, there was a cutoff point in, like, this is the most this person can handle just based off adherence. A few clients, like, early on into coaching, could see at the end, I'm like, adherence is a little spotty. Tried interventions to improve it. It's not really working. It still makes sense for them to see out the prep, but it doesn't make sense for me continuing to diet them if they're already struggling to beat adherence thus far. If someone got incredibly lean, like inside out lean, okay, well, then I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive with that rate of gain because it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to continue to sit in that state. Other things, current muscle mass. Someone who's a little bit more muscle mass, maybe they can be a little less rigid generally with how they're approaching that rate of gain. Maybe they can shift a little bit to the higher side because they do have a higher degree of muscle mass, which ultimately that is kind of with the assumption that, like, okay, maybe they don't need nearly as much as someone else who, let's say they're starting and they need 10, 15 pounds. Well, okay, the weight that they're going to gain, assuming that there is a skill development that needs to occur relative to them gaining muscle, maybe specific to training. In that case, maybe I'm going to be a little bit more conservative with that target rate of gain. The size of the deficit, the duration of cardio. It's like, yeah, like if someone had their cardio run up really high at the end of contest prep, it's probably going to make the most sense to pull that down, because ultimately keeping that cardio high, like really high post show, it's only going to further drive these dysregulations. So if pulling that down means that we're not able to pull food as high, because now if we pull food high, that would put them in a too big of a surplus. Okay, well, in that case, maybe we're accepting a higher degree of a higher rate of gain for that individual. How much muscle you need? When is the timeline generally of your next prep? I had a girl compete earlier this year, and she's like, listen, like I'm only going to be in the sport for a few more years. And frankly, like I am going to compete at the end of the year, whether I'm as muscled as I need. Like I need to do this because I only have so many shows available in my competition career, like left for my competitive career as a bikini athlete. I'm like, cool. Okay. Well, that is going to be consideration in how quickly we put that weight on, as opposed to someone who's like, yo, I'm going to be taking 2 years off because I have other priorities in life. I do want to gain while I'm spending time off stage, but frankly, I'm not going to be on stage for a while. That was the case for me. Whenever I did my last show, I was like, listen, I'm going to be off stage for about a year and a half after this, because I'm going to be starting nursing school. I'm going to be going through the clinical portion of it, and I'm not going to compete while I'm doing that. So rate of gain, well, yeah, it would be really nice if it was kept nice and tight and it was very conservative. But frankly, I'm like, I have the time to implement a mini cut at some point, at some future point, not immediately post show, but it is going to be something that I have the luxury to do, as opposed to if I had less time in between the end of one season and the beginning of another, would want to be more conservative with that. Without a doubt, your ability to adhere to a program, that is going to be ultimately the driving factor in how you approach post-show, the size of surplus that you create for yourself. And this is why having a coach set up a timeline, or you yourself setting up a timeline, that's something that I can very easily do for you. If you do a one-on-one consultation, I can build out a timeline, be like, hey, follow this. If you feel comfortable, if you feel adequate, like you have the skill to just follow it, go ahead. But having that tool, having something that is very clear, very objective in the sense of this is what you're supposed to expect on a weekly basis. If you're in this kind of surplus, this is how that will translate in terms of scale weight over the next 2 to 3 months. It's one of the best investments that you can make. And I can say, like, it's still hard. Like, adherence isn't going to be perfect, even if you do things correctly, even if you have a timeline. I mean, like, just getting to body fats that you've never been to, like the first time getting down to them, that will be likely unsettling. That will require, as cheesy as this is, a different version of you. It will require you to do things that you probably haven't ever done, even if those things are sitting with the discomfort of being that lean. If you're unable to adhere to a specific set of numbers, I mean, like, you're not in a position to be more aggressive. And that's really the thing I have to stress for people who get frustrated post-show, who are like, honestly, I wish I wasn't gaining at this fast of a rate. Can we do a mini cut or can we slow it down? And I'm like, like, you're not able to adhere to these calories already. Being more aggressive, it's going to set you up for a very insidious cycle, because now you're going to continue to believe that your execution, this best effort, is still not good enough, although it's still going to result in the fat gain. And this is exactly why, like, taking an intuitive approach to post-show, I think, is a very bad idea. I think even for someone who's highly skilled, someone who is very tuned and has a lot of discipline, I still think being intuitive, it's just a quick way to put you in a position where body fat comes on very rapidly. Now, when we get into like setting expectations for yourself, like setting expectations for your adherence, the biggest mistake, the biggest issue that I see is that individuals will often go into their post-show period and be like, no, I'm going to be perfect. Like, I want it bad enough. Like, the reality is you're going to mess up. Everyone messes up. Your coach might even mess up. Like, they might send you your post-show plan a little bit late, or they might be a couple days behind in getting back to you. Like, there's going to be things that happen that you don't anticipate. And I think, for one, just like acknowledging that there are going to be times where your execution is not perfect, I think that's essential. And I think if you act like anything but perfection is largely tied to your skill as an athlete, your value as an athlete, I think you're going to end up messing up even worse and more frequently. I think going in and like being very honest that, like, okay, here are the things that are going to happen. You're going to overeat. You're going to misreport food. You're going to fail to plan, and your schedule's going to get thrown off, and you're going to be without a meal, and you're going to have to make a decision kind of on the fly. Like, okay, I'm going out to eat now. What am I going to get? What is something reasonable? You're going to have low motivation. You're going to have some kind of discrepancy in discipline at certain times. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be stressed. And these things are going to happen all under the guise that, like, hunger signaling is not restored. It is not back to baseline. And that's where, like, you really have to go into this with realistic expectations around what metrics you're going to track to determine success, to determine performance. And for me, like, I like to build in ways for clients to succeed post-show. I like to build in ways for them to intentionally to plan, to have days where they do go out to eat, where they're forced to track foods that are not prepared. I think this is a really important practice, exercise for them to do outside of the gym, obviously, for them to really consider, okay, like, real life might require you deviate from a prepped meal. I mean, like, sure, you're dialed in for your pro debut or for a national show. I want it to be as tightly controlled as possible, as accurate as possible. But real life does encompass modifications. It will include states that are suboptimal. And I think that's really, like, the root of it is when we get into what is a highly skilled athlete. I think it comes down to an athlete who's able to stay the course and not deviate too far off, even in those states that are suboptimal. So in the case where you see that, let's just say, like, okay, the rate of gain is a little bit higher, it's, occurring at a rate that, let's say you're you're not expecting, you're not used to, okay, well, this might be a point where instead of like leaning into, hey, I need to do a mini cut, because at that point it's like a mini cut, you're not in a state for that even to be productive. That ultimately is just going to further dysregulate you. If that's the case, okay, well, it might seem like the best alternative is to compensate for a faster rate of gain. But in reality, it might make more sense just to stabilize, just to settle, just to find that continuity, particularly if adherence is not locked in. Sometimes the best thing you can do is not act, is not make a change, not pivot in the opposite direction. I mean, ultimately in this state, you really have to consider, is what you're doing, is it going to potentially affect adherence? Maybe not now, maybe not today, but doing 3, 4, 5 more days of increased rigidity in your program, if that is going to then result in potentially lower adherence one day, potentially a very large overage, it's not worth it. Like knowing when to fold, knowing when to take a step back and be like, you know what, this is the best I can do. Maybe it's occurring at a faster rate than I initially wanted, but it's not worth taking 2 steps back just to feel like, okay, I did the thing one day. I worked a little bit harder one day. And I think this is a skill that honestly is going to come from experience, trial and error, messing up, auditing those mess ups, and accepting that, like, you know, mess ups and learning from those mistakes, that is an essential part of this period of the journey. Hate that I'm using that word, of, you know, being a physique athlete. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. As always, I will see you in the next one.